Many point to Teddy Roosevelt as the pioneer of the progressive era, but this is not the whole truth. In fact, many of the progressive era reforms were first suggested by the Populist Party in the late 19th century. The man who brought those ideas to the national scene should be given the credit for beginning the progressive era, not Teddy Roosevelt. That man is William Jennings Bryan, and his leadership of the Democratic Party, injection of populist ideas into the main two parties, and subsequent years of reform work that led to a more progressive America earned him a spot on the APUSH Wall of Fame. Bryan's saga begins in 1890 with the congressional elections. As the populists gained power, Bryan, a staunch advocate of popular democracy, was elected to the Nebraska Congress. In 1892, he was re-elected but lost his seat in 1894. However, in 1896, Bryan shot onto the national scene at the Democratic Convention with his dramatic Cross of Gold speech, in which he lambasted the gold standard, rousingly finishing the speech by saying, "You shall not crucify man upon a cross of gold." Nowadays considered one of the greatest speeches in American history, it catapulted Bryan from his dark horse spot on the convention ballot to the forerunner. He beat incumbent Grover Cleveland for the nomination, becoming the Democratic nominee as well as the populist nominee. In the general election of 1896, the Populist Party platform contained a lot of radical ideas. Despite being a Democrat, Bryan supported these, but they were not supported by most members of the main two parties. These ideas included a more fair ballot, including the destruction of political machines, later encouraged by the so-called leader of the progressive movement, Theodore Roosevelt, a federal income tax, later created under Wilson, another apparent progressive, with the 16th Amendment, nationally distributed currency, later made possible by the Federal Reserve Act, again under Wilson, and the direct election of senators established in 1913 with the 17th Amendment, also under Wilson. All of these goals were part of the Populist Party platform of 1896 and supported by Bryan, but just because he lost the election, the credit for them doesn't go to him or any of the populists, even though Bryan's nomination brought the populist platform to the forefront of politics, likely giving many of the progressives the ideas for their reforms. Even after losing the election of 1896, Bryan remained at the forefront of the Democratic Party. Although he supported the Spanish-American War, he was against imperialism. He merely believed that Cuba should be a free and sovereign state, not that it or the Philippines should be taken over by the United States. In 1900, he gave a speech against imperialism, stating that the U.S. shouldn't try to emulate Great Britain and other European countries, who were in the midst of conquering much of Africa and Asia. This platform of anti-imperialism and the spreading of democracy was later appropriated by Wilson with his moral diplomacy. Wilson also appointed Bryan to the position of Secretary of State. As Secretary of State, Bryan continued to work towards peace, negotiating 28 treaties with as many countries that promised that the countries would come to the U.S. for arbitration before war broke out. Although World War I eventually occurred and the treaties failed, they were an important step in U.S. foreign policy towards forming alliances of peace and protection with other countries, as would be seen later with the United Nations, which still operates today. Bryan was so staunchly for peace that, when President Wilson sent strict demands to Germany after the sinking of the Lusitania, Bryan resigned as Secretary of State. He was remarkably prescient, observing that it is not likely that either side will win so complete a victory as to be able to dictate terms, and if either side does win such a victory, it will probably mean preparation for another war. After his resignation as Secretary of State, Wilson entered another chapter of his life, anti-evolution activism. However, if you look at his reasons, his other accomplishments are hardly diminished. First, Bryan wanted to see the beauty in life, and he saw the theory of evolution as an inherently ugly thing. He saw the idea that humans achieved what they were through the law of hate, by which the strong crowd and kill off the weak, as despicable, and preferred to see humanity's status as a result of the law of love, rather than as a result of the law of hate. Second, Bryan saw Darwinism as applied to society to be the cause of great evil, leading to hatred and conflicts such as the World War. Although these reasons are weaker today, it must be remembered that there was far less evidence for evolution in the early 1900s, and that present values should not be projected onto past times. In the end, Bryan did far more for the US and the world than he took away with his anti-evolution activism. His support of populist party goals brought them to the forefront of American politics, eventually leading them to be taken by those who are now seen as the progressives. The effects of these goals are still felt today. Senators are still elected by the popular vote. The ballot is far more fair than it was, and political machines are non-existent. Income tax is a staple of everyday American life, whereas it used to be a radical idea. And money is distributed nationally by the Federal Reserve, a stable system that was once considered a dream. Bryan's goals of peace are still being worked towards, but there is now a web of support and connections extending across the world, the United Nations. If it weren't for Bryan and his tireless efforts to better the world, Who knows how many of those things would be true? It is clear that he had a great impact, and thus he deserves a spot on the Wall of Fame.